Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of Geeks and Gurus. I'm Sam Fell, and I'm joined here today by two fantastically smart individuals. I'm excited to talk with them today about the Gartner APM and O MQ. We're going to get into that and figure out why they changed the name and what did they change in the MQ. Before we get into that, I want to introduce my co-panelists here, Erez, Barak. Good morning. Good evening, I guess, for you.
Hey, Sam. Thank you. Thanks so much. Good morning to you. I'm Erez Barak. I'm at the Sumo Logic. I'm focusing on the observability side of the house where it comes to building our product and defining solutions for customers. Prior to joining Sumo, spent about a decade in the Azure team, learning a lot about the cloud, the people, products required for that. So excited to be in this episode. Thank you for having
Awesome.
me.
Thank you for joining us. Mitch Ashley, good morning.
Hey, Sam. Good to see you and be here with Erez and you. My name is Mitch Ashley. I am principal of TechStrong Research, analyst firms focused on DevOps, cloud native, cybersecurity, which happen to be all the things in my background. I also serve as CTO for TechStrong Group, so DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container General, TechStrong TV. So I'm kind of a practicing analyst, I guess maybe you think of it that way. My background is doing both security and SaaS products, as well as running IT organizations. So I've been on both the delivery and the creating products to deliver.
Nice. Well, we're super excited to have you joining us, and I think that this is going to be a great conversation for folks to get a sense of what happened in the Gartner APM and O MQ. It's hard to say that, put all those letters together, and it starts to become a mouth of marbles. But the MQ has been on for at least 15 years. It's been through multiple iterations. It went from just an MQ to an MQ of a suites, because at the time, back in I think 2015, people couldn't do everything that had to be done to accomplish the APM capabilities with one product. Then they changed it back down to just the MQ with no suites at it in 2016. So there's been quite a bit of adjustment. This is the first year that Sumo Logic has been in the MQ. So Erez, let's talk a little bit about that. We are in the MQ the first time this year. How do you feel about where we landed?
It feels great, to be honest. I'll start with that. And I think I'll talk about two perspectives. There's multiple perspectives here, but I'll talk about the product first. I think it's great to be recognized and discussed, in a way, a bit back on the world of APM and where APM is heading, recognizes the world of observability and the environment that's driving the need for observability, namely multi-cloud and more complex microservice architecture. Able to be a part of a journey of a product that supports that kind of architecture, that supports really ensuring reliability for customers and making applications better in the world. That's a very exciting product side. I'll mention one more aspect is the people aspect. Mostly or mainly our customers here. I think what Gartner has done, probably really full out since COVID started, is change a bit of the review process and have this peer review process where you go online, you provide them your review of the product, and using that to get direct customer feedback, direct customer opinions, and direct customer direction of where they want us to go. Being in the world of developing products, that's exactly where you want to be. So, it's exciting. It's a first step in a long journey. We realize that we haven't reached a destination, but being recognized as part of that journey and get to sort of walk it mile after mile makes us all feel quite good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're in rarefied air for sure. It's a party that's been going on for a long time, and so we're super excited to be recognized and part of it. Mitch, what are your thoughts about the Gartner MQ? Obviously, you may not have thoughts specifically about where Sumo Logic landed, but what are your thoughts about, maybe that's what your thoughts are about, or maybe you want to just talk a little bit about the Gartner MQ in general.
Well, I do want to say congratulations for being on it, and also I think in a pretty distinguished area in the Challenger quadrant. You're north, right? You're above the line, and in that Challenger space. So, the way I look at the market is, APM has been around for a long time, as you mentioned, Sam. I remember talking APM when we were talking about website performance monitoring. Is kind of, I think, where one of the places it started from too. But we've had, with the rise of cloud native and cloud applications and proliferation of a lot of technology, we've moved into the cloud. So the application performance management is also in parallel butted up with observability, which is APM and O, right? Which is the reason for O. So I think that's a distinction characteristic as well, because apps have transitioned. We still have monolith apps and SOA kind of applications, or we're doing service-oriented architecture. Now we do cloud native. But with that, it's become as new needs for understanding what applications are doing, thus the observability space. And you get into things like tracing and telemetry, and I'm sure we'll probably dive into that a little bit too. But those are things that are now, the fact that we're talking about performance together with the observability and you being in that space. And there are pure play folks who are relatively new, let's say in the last 5 or so years in this space. And there are folks like yourselves that have been doing this for a while. And I won't put names to anybody, but as we know, as things become popular and terms become in vogue, a lot of folks put that name on their product, even if they're not necessarily in that space. Maybe they get there, maybe they don't. I certainly wouldn't put you in that category. But I think that's recognition of you are a player in both APM and observability. So that's what I have to say.
Absolutely. Awesome. So let's start this time. I'm going to start with you, Mitch. So why do you think that they added observability to the report this year? You mentioned that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we're at a point where we can't talk about APM without observability. And also observability, we talk about APM when we get into SRE and performance management of applications. So they have intersected. And so keeping them apart would, I think, be only for historical reasons. And now you get into the discussion of, but I'm not buying just an APM tool anymore. I'm not buying just an observability tool. I'm buying something, or bringing into the fabric of my tool set something that I can use to do security management, that I can do existing application management. I can do that with my cloud native application. I can do that with services and API layers and things that I'm using in my infrastructure. So we don't live in we still have silos. We know that, but we live in a world where these things are all intersecting, and so we're having to deal with that. And I think that's at least one of the reasons why that's combined now.
And you mentioned some generations of technology that people are trying to manage, some legacy stuff and some more cloud native stuff, and being able to cover that, the generations as well as the breadth of all that stuff. It's not easy, but observability, having that data, I think that's a great place to start, is to have.
We're not all digital native greenfield companies. A lot of us aren't.
Right. Erez, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it recognizes in a very interesting manner the evolution that's happening in the industry, and the evolution you're hearing when you start diving into customer demand. It used to be, right, have a proprietary agent, install that agent. We've now sort of defined that world for you. And yes, let's go, you're an APM player. I think long gone are the days where you can make that claim of, hey, this agent will take care of anything you need in the next few months even.
We know what to look for. Yeah.
It's a world of many knowns, but many unknowns. And, I could even repeat and say unknown unknowns. And I think observability recognizes that. It says, look, it's not well defined. it's complex because the systems, the products, the use cases assume there's going to be plenty of unknowns. And for that, you got to have this attribute around observability, the ability to know what's going on from the outside, reading, anything ranging from infrastructure to application telemetry. So, I was not aware of the name change until pretty late in the game. And I do think I found it very much refreshing on the level of, hey, we're recognizing this shift in the environment, in the ecosystem. And I believe this naming is associated with recognition of that shift.
Yeah. And in the report, and if you want to, you can go to our website. There's a link to view the MQ report, which I definitely recommend you do. Lots of interesting learnings. But the way that Gartner defined observability as part of the APM MQ was because they said that observability offers a more exploratory investigative workflow that's more akin to business analytics than IT. And so I read that to mean, the developers, you're out there, we're making applications, you're doing continuous integration. You make a change and it's incorporated into Trunk and everybody knows about it so they can work on top of your good work. And then you do continuous deployment, right? The continuous deployment, you make sure that everything gets out so that the value can be delivered. Once it's out there, you need to observe it. And observability, where you ask a question and you get an answer back 3 hours later, if you're looking at 24 hours worth of data and your analytics has to sift through that and it takes it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, imagine trying to do investigation and having that huge delay when you're trying to ask those questions to get to those unknown unknowns. And so you think about continuous integration and you think about continuous deployment. That's why we talk about this idea of continuous intelligence and making sure that ability to ask those questions, the observability type questions, is something that happens with the analytics that Erez and his team are putting together in real time. And we've talked a little bit about cloud native, and we've talked a little bit about sort of legacy architectures. We're an older company, you mentioned that, Mitch, but our architecture, it's cloud native architecture. When we started, we said, hey, that's the way it has to be. That's the way people are going to go. And at the time, that was kind of a controversial thing because not everybody wanted to send all of their data to somebody else. But we've got all the attestations and everybody, Amazon ASV Partner of the Year, people obviously appreciate the security that we have. It's just a very interesting sort of dynamic around this observability. Adding this observability word to APM changes the way I think the operators interact with the tool. So interesting stuff.
One thing I would add to that, Sam, is that we live in a world today that, operations and managing all this is about connecting the dots. What happened? What do we have? What information do we have that tells us what's going on or what happened at a certain point in time? Well, the number of dots have exploded because of cloud native, because of the integrations, because of the number of APIs that we use. So observability is really a recognition that it takes more than logs and alerting, and I need to be able to connect those dots. And the other part of it is also the point in time when that happened. My environment may look very different right now. If I'm looking at a peak in performance, or maybe I hit a cap on performance, what it looked like, what my Kubernetes and how many clusters and how many instances of containers I'm running, of whatever services that are in, all those things, that could have looked very different that point in time than it does at this moment. And so that ephemeral, that rapidly changing environment, I have to have a way of understanding not just what all the logs were, but what all that looked like, so I can connect the dots and answer the questions about performance or reliability or resiliency.
That's right. And APM obviously is more than just logs. It's the logs, it's the metrics, it's the traces. It's being able to go back and look at all the signals to help you understand what the state of your system was at that time. That's basically observability. Awesome. All right. So Erez, what are your thoughts? I mean, the Gartner in the report, if you go download it, you'll see, or go take a look at it, you'll see they talk a lot about OpenTelemetry this year. And so folks in the audience, if you've done anything with OpenTelemetry, maybe raise your hand and chat. But Erez, what are your thoughts about the addition of OpenTelemetry to the ecosystem and to the Gartner APM MQ?
OpenTelemetry, I think, is a defining event in our industry. I'll even take it that far. And it's definitely a milestone for every enterprise that adopts the idea. I liked seeing the report rallying around this. I like, the alignment of our strategy and sort of stated direction around this. And I think it's that important, really. And I say this as a vendor because it allows customers to avoid vendor lock-in. It no longer creates this situation where, hey, we've adopted a certain vendor and now we're sort of at the beck and call of their roadmap, what they're about to release, what they like, what they don't like. This is adopting the industry. This is adopting the community. And this is saying, I'm going to go with OpenTelemetry, and I can pick and choose as a user, as a customer, as someone who's driving reliability, functionality I like, which functionality I value, and which areas are not as important to me. And it's not because I chose a certain vendor that I'll go with that, but it's because I chose the path of OpenTelemetry. I can now say, you know what, I'll use this distribution for bringing in my metrics. And wow, I really love what that other team has done with spans. I'm going to use a different distribution to pull those in. They all collate into one schema and provide one set of data you can build experiences on. So it opens up or unlocks the opportunity for users. It decouples the vendor choice from the roadmap I can set as an SRE manager. And I think that's why it's so fundamental, or it's such a fundamental change for the industry.
And obviously, it's very important to Sumo Logic. What you didn't say there is that we have our own OpenTelemetry distribution that we're promoting because we're all in on OpenTelemetry. That is the future of collection at Sumo Logic. So if you're interested in OpenTelemetry and you want to play around with it, as Erez said, it's easy to get that set up. You own your own telemetry, and you can push it wherever you want to. You can try ours, you can try someone else's. It doesn't make a difference. Mitch, what are your thoughts? Are you hearing from other folks that OpenTelemetry is a kind of a big deal?
It's a big deal for a couple of reasons, Sam. One, I definitely hear from customers that increasingly is a requirement in their buying decisions. They're not going to go with an APM or observability vendor who is not all in on observability. I think that's OpenTelemetry, sorry. Yes, yeah, that's okay. Thanks for the correction. So it is very much something that buyers are, it's becoming a requirement, kind of one of those, price to play, if you will. I think it's also notable for another reason. I mean, we all know the importance of open source. We wouldn't have the cloud without it. But OpenTelemetry in particular, being an evolution of combining together with open tracing and kind of pulling this into one project, what's really unique about it, I think, is how the vendor community and also end user, but how the vendor community who are in governance and on the board and contributing and all of that, it is people who are, head-to-head, day-to-day, knock out each other competitors, but they are all, I think, in for good intention contributing to OpenTelemetry, because collecting the data isn't where you're going to differentiate. Matter of fact, me as a customer, it's sort of like, well, do I have to install another agent? You're all doing the same thing, right? I'm buying your product not to get me the data. I can get that. I need the analytics. I need the performance management. I need the information that's telling me where I've got the issues that I've got that are happening. That's what I want to get from Sumo Logic and the other folks that are in this space.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that I'm interested to see if we'll see other parts of open source that actually kind of elevate themselves to this kind of relationship. Is co-opetition is a bit of an old word, but it's an interesting
very valid.
It's elevated itself to another level, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Erez, any follow-up thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'll move on.
No, I think we can move on. I think, you're all seeing how excited we are about OpenTelemetry. I think you got a couple of other items you wanted to cover. Go ahead, Sam.
Awesome. All right. So Mitch, this one's for you. So the other thing, as you read that report, you'll note that they talk about security, the changes in the APM MQ. Now it's APM and O, and one of the critical capabilities now is actually security, a security use case for security operators. This Gartner talked about the reason that they added it was because they had a lot of clients coming and talking to them and saying, hey, during Log4j, Log4Shell, their vulnerability management solutions weren't catching the problem, but their APM solutions were. And so I guess, Mitch, as an analyst in the segment, what are you seeing with regards to observability and security? And does what Gartner did by adding a security capability to the APM MQ make sense to you?
Well, we're past the point of erecting walls to protect our applications, just like we used to protect our networks that way. And with architectures like cloud native, it's a very porous architecture, right? Even API first design applications where APIs are the product, that's how you interface with what we do. It really is everywhere. And so I know from this market, even in the observability space, many companies buy these products like yours for security, for their SOC, not just for their operations, for the cloud or for the applications. So it's another area where you can't not combine it, if I can use a double negative. You can't talk about observability without talking about security and vice versa, because it's in the fabric of how these applications are built. And we oftentimes have to, like Log4j, right? There's a supply chain, software supply chain issue of where is it in my stack or multiple places in my stack that might occur in open source, third-party products, SaaS services, where? And I need to know, because that presents a whole nother attack vector that I maybe didn't have to worry about when I'm just thinking about application performance management, but I do now.
Right. Interesting. Erez, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's an interesting, again, indication Gartner provides. Yeah, you may not be ready, bring together reliability and security, but you don't want to preclude any future connection between the two. So make sure you're thinking about it. Make sure telemetry, all types of logs can flow in for security and reliability. Make sure that the insights you garner can cover both. And make sure you pick a vendor that allows you to grow into the area at your own pace. So I think having this as a new indication here says it's not a strong, hey, get reliability and security together today, but it is, hey, it's coming down the road. You'll see a lot more of it. You want to prepare, you want to be strategic about it.
Right. Yeah, I was at the Monitorama a little while back. Fantastic show. And there were a lot of people there that were talking about Corey Quinn, all right, from the Duckbill Group. He was talking about the fact that people right now are putting their data into like multiple different systems. That egress cost of that data costs, like if you have to egress logs to a security solution, you have to egress logs to an observability solution, it's the same logs. It's the same data. So you're paying for it twice. So, one of the things that we talk about is that in a lot of cases, people's data volume is growing faster than their budget volume. And so how do you deal with those types of things? Well, it's by thinking ahead, by making smart decisions about your architectures and your solutions that you're using. So I think that's a really important thing for Gartner to take a look at, because Gartner growth, I don't know anyone out there, if your data is slowing down, the amount of data that you're ingesting is slowing down, I have a hard time believing that. So you're doing something wrong. All right. This has been really interesting. I have one more question for you both, you gentlemen. Erez, I'm going to start with you. So the market has evolved. It's evolving. Where do you think it's going next? What do you think are going to be the key capabilities next year, or what are your thoughts on next year's MQ?
I think the market, and if I put myself in the user's today for a second, is indicating we need to make SREs productive. We need to make them effective. We mentioned OpenTelemetry is now opening up the doors to do that. You mentioned data is growing faster than budget. So what do? Focus on experiences for monitoring, for diagnostics, for troubleshooting, frankly, for managing at scale with SLOs, and how those workflows can be accelerated with the help of AI, with the help of understanding what the customer is looking for, are a key ingredient in every observability solution moving forward. So when I look forward, I think, hey, customer, what are your day-to-day experiences? Where do you want to be faster, more insightful, and really focus on your business, not on collecting data? And I think the solutions that would rise above and think about those experiences are going to be the ones that provide most value to different users out there.
Mitch, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you think we're headed with observability and APM?
I'm really glad, Ezra, that you mentioned the user experience, the digital experiences that we're creating. That can be customers, partners, and end customers, traditional customers. Another aspect to think of this is with including things like SRE and thinking about this tied into a larger process, a DevOps process, where we're delivering software, multiple teams across an organization, is we're starting to think about beyond reliability and thinking about resiliency. So how do we create our systems? And I say systems meaning all of the software and all the services and where it's located, whatever cloud or private data center. It isn't just it's down, right? Because we've divided it into so many smaller parts today. But it restarted itself and it spun up 4 other instances, and so we've designed it to do that, or we've utilized people with the SRE skills to go out and find those places where we can make our software more resilient. So I think that's a key value that observability and APM can bring. I mean, you can't do it without it. You have to have those tools to be able to understand, okay, now how do we make it more resilient? Because where is it that the failures, not the failures we know about, but the ones we know that can happen, that we can go out and create ourselves and then do something about it to make our software, our systems, our services, our user experience more resilient. So that is definitely a theme of where we're headed.
Was a talk here when I was at Monitorama. One of the folks from Facebook, from Meta, gave a talk about problems that they discovered in the silicon chips for specific language, for a specific operation. Once it's been gone down to assembly level, it has to happen exactly the right, but it was like a 1 in a billion chance. But because of the scale of their system, they said the odds of that happening at Facebook were the same odds of an earthquake hitting Portland at the time we were at the show within the next 6 hours.
Wow.
Which is like, you start to think like, okay, these are things that actually happen because of their scale. And so finding these unknown unknowns and having the ability to get into that telemetry, and they had like not an easy time of trying to troubleshoot this problem. And they shared the problem with all of their chip manufacturers, and they've shared it with Google. I mean, it's a really interesting story. But to be able to find problems like that requires so much of that investigation and so much of that analytics that Erez was talking about. I think that there's so many opportunities for us to help
before the earthquake happened.
Yeah, right? Because God forbid Facebook goes down. What would we do?
Oh, right? My. Yeah, go home, right? Well, I'll go home. Well, then what do we do when we get home? So.
That's right. Awesome. Well, I think this has been a really, really interesting conversation. I appreciate both of you joining to talk a little bit about the Gartner APM and OMQ. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time on Geeks and Gurus.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.